On the slides, please. Good evening, all of you. A very warm welcome to this 71st episode of Thursday Musings. We again have our favorite stalwart back with us. So next slide, please. Let me hand over the session to Professor Dr. Tufan Pati sir. He'll guide the program and he'll take over the further proceedings. Sir, over to you. Sir, you have to unmute yourself.
Yes. Formally, I have to tell that we are three of us. We are here, myself and our dear vibrant moderators, Dr. Ali Siddiqui and Dr. Amrit Pattujoshi. I am skipping the introduction. And next slide, please. Rohit ji. Our chairperson is Professor Prabhat Chithole of Lucknow. He is consultant psychiatrist practicing in Lucknow and is ex-professor and head of the Department of Psychiatry, KGMC, Lucknow. This brief introduction he wanted for him, although its introduction is very large. Next one, please. We have got Dr. Krishna Kadam from Pune, consultant psychiatrist, Maharashtra Institute of Mental Health and Shasan Hospital, Pune, for the last 15 years. He is alumnus of Department of Psychiatry, BSA Medical College, Pune. He is currently president of Pune Psychiatric Association and assistant general secretary of IPS. Areas of interest, community psychiatry and forensic psychiatry. Welcome, Dr. Krishna Kadam. With this, I hand over the proceedings of meetings, further proceedings to Dr. Prabhat Chithole and Dr. Krishna Kadam. Please take over.
Chithole sir, you have to unmute yourself.
Is it all right?
Yes, sir.
Am I audible? Okay, all right. Let me begin by saying that the topic is very interesting and very challenging for persons like me. I have been taking care of children with psychiatric problems all my life and haven't really done very much about promotion of child mental health and protection and providing psychosocial care. Well, little bits here and there, a little bit of training in England and seeing what's happening at NIMHANS, and that's about all. I've been dealing with children who have been sick, who have been ill. Coming to think of this topic, I mean, one could think in two ways. One could think of children who are outside the hospital, who are not clinically ill or having any psychiatric disorder, but they could be in situations where they are vulnerable to harm. There could be problem. There will be risks of, say, abuse or of exploitation, of neglect, and such things. And providing psychosocial care for them, protection for them, is a challenge. And I do not quite know, I mean, I don't understand. I would like to hear from the speaker, Professor Shekhar, whether this is something which is very much understood in India. With that, I would like to stop myself, and I'll request Dr. Kadam to kindly introduce Dr. Shekhar, though well known as he is, everybody knows him, but I would request Dr. Kadam to tell us formally about Dr. Shekhar Seshadri. Seshadri is a stalwart. He knows, he has worked in these areas for a long time, and I'm sure this will be a great learning opportunity for me and everybody else. Dr. Kadam, please.
Good evening, all. It's my pleasure to introduce the stalwart Dr. Shekhar Seshadri, sir. Dr. Shekhar Seshadri is graduate from Maulana Azad Medical College, Delhi, and postgraduate in psychiatry from National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences. He's currently senior professor, Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at NIMHANS, Bangalore. Besides working with child and adolescent mental health, including developmental disabilities, he is actively involved in the areas of gender and sexualities, violence, trauma and abuse, children in difficult circumstances, juvenile justice, experiential methodologies, school programs, teacher training in life skill education, community and school mental health programs, forum, theater, and qualitative research. Sir, it's my pleasure to welcome you for this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thursday Musings, and thank you very much, Dr. Prabhat Sitole and Dr. Kadam for this kind introduction, setting the tone that just a very small correction. I was remiss in not sending an updated affiliation. I was senior professor of child and adolescent psychiatry. I retired from NIMHANS on 30th of November after spending 40 years in NIMHANS, 4 years as postgraduate and 36 years as senior resident and faculty. So it's been a long innings, and it's a journey, many parts of which I have had the privilege of sharing with Prabhat over so many meetings, and also when he came as examiner when the very first DM program was started, and we had the first DM outgoing batch. And so we have been shoulder to shoulder in the whole area of child mental health. And Prabhat, I wanted to take this occasion to say what a privilege it has, an honor it has been to know you as a professional and to have worked with you. And Dr. Kadam, Maharashtra Institute of Mental Health has always been very dear to us because of the friendship I've shared with Mohan. And so what a pleasure to share this platform.
Thank you.
As Prabhat pointed out, the whole issue of child mental health outside of the hospital, but I'm not really talking entirely of the outside. And Alim, can you tell me if my slides are visible?
They are.
Yes, sir, they are.
Thank you very much. So this is really about integrating child mental health protection and psychosocial care. And I want to share with all of you friends the kind of work that Prabhat has actually tabled. Now, I have always been a firm believer in public health, in public mental health, and in public child mental health. We also know that for every child who manages to reach a tertiary care center, there are 99 others who will never reach you. And this is something that I wanted to essentially share. So if you really look at childhood adversity, which again Prabhat alluded to, and vulnerability and risk, and look at this, our entire psychiatric fraternity in some ways equipping itself with the challenges of addressing the needs and well-being of 40% of the population. Let's first glance at the whole issue of categories of vulnerable children. Now, who are these children? Orphaned and abandoned? Are we talking about street and working children? HIV infected and affected? Children with disability? Children affected by gender and sexuality vulnerabilities? Children in conflict with the law? And very young children. Let me tell you something which we have been very preoccupied and concerned about, particularly in the light of the current pandemic. Friends, a 1-month-old child or a 6-month-old child, even in a pre-COVID era, would more or less be at home. The 14, 16, 18-year-olds find their own way of negotiating the social mobility issues and lockdown issues, either through social media or through the mobile phone, or sneaking out of the house, as the case may be. What about the 4, 5, and 6-year-olds? What about children with disability? And if you really look at these children who in any case had mobilities that were compromised by virtue of their age or the presence of disability or both, what is going to happen to their developmental trajectories 2 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And here is an opportunity for scholars of developmental psychology, almost on an evolutionary basis, to look at the impact of the pandemic on developmental trajectories of children. So we have here the whole issue of categories. Now, if you look at contexts of vulnerable children, these kids may have lived within their families and communities, but even in those families, they are exposed to multiple psychosocial risk factors. And Prabhat referred to them when he spoke about the whole experience of abuse. It could be emotional, physical, or sexual. It's about the theme of substance abuse within families, or parental conflict, or even the presence of domestic violence. As you know, these are also called adverse childhood experiences. If COVID is a current pandemic, adverse childhood experiences has been an everlasting epidemic. Now, many of these children may be in their families, and they may have possessed social networks, but these are often severely compromised, placing them at high risk. And these are the kind of kids who ultimately end up being placed in institutions. So we had categories, we have contexts, and we have experiences. What are the kind of experiences that vulnerable children undergo and endure? Single parent families, experiences of rejection and abandonment, marital parental conflict, loss and grief experiences. Look at the whole narrative in the second wave of the pandemic. The narrative of the first wave was essentially old people with comorbidities. The narrative in the second wave was younger people, even those who were vaccinated, 50-year-old, 45-year-old, and we were losing them. And the whole story, therefore, of the COVID orphan, and therefore the death of the parents and any other attachment figure, whether due to COVID or any other reason, is an important issue. And this issue is further accentuated in children who come from vulnerable circumstances, particularly if there is the theme of alcohol dependence, alcoholic liver disease, and so on, or alcohol-related road traffic accidents and death by, those are different and complex stories that play out in vulnerable children's lives. And this is why, if you look at the whole premise and philosophy of Thursday Musings, which actually started as in the context of a master class in psychotherapy, our whole interest in narratives and what context do children come from? Do they have parents with mental illness or disability? Is there violence at home? Are there different kinds of marginalization, exclusion and abuse, even of an emotional nature that occurs at home? Has a child been trafficked either for labor or for sex work? Has the child come into conflict with the law? Does the child suffer from illness or disability, juvenile onset diabetes, a chronic asthma, a nephrotic syndrome, frequent hospitalizations, loss of developmental and peer experiences because of this? And what does that therefore do to the mental health and well-being of the child and this child's notion of identity and emerging personhood? So we have categories, we have contexts, and we have experiences. Friends, some children are less equal than others. Now, India, as you know, is home to over 30% of almost 385 million children living in extreme poverty or adversity. This is the highest in South Asia. Now, when we say children in adversity, the experience of life events and circumstances which may combine to threaten or challenge healthy development, and that's what we mean by an adversity. Now, these are children whose developmental trajectories can be affected by various adverse factors, and we've already alluded to them: abuse, loss and bereavement, and chronic situations of neglect, of discrimination, family stresses, and structural inequalities and socioeconomic disadvantage. And let us recognize that pandemics of the nature of COVID have a disproportionate impact on the more vulnerable populations, the daily wage workers, the migrant workers. And the mental illness, if you look at it in one way, neurochemistry and genetics notwithstanding, is basically a social condition. And unless we recognize the social context in which mental illness actually takes place, we will not use the narrative approach to actually provide solace and healing to the children and families that we seek to assist. Therefore, if you want to link child mental health and protection, and you look at the whole cycle of the vulnerability of children in difficult circumstances, as I have enumerated, to begin with, if you look at the lack of quality mental health interventions and how that contributes to an escalation of mental health problems and a negative response from caregivers and service providers, and a further exacerbation of these problems and heightened protection risks, giving rise to protection and mental health problems and further lack of quality. And this pernicious cycle continues. And this link of child mental health and protection needs to be kept in mind. And I will refer to the whole lack of quality mental health interventions in terms of core training in child mental health practice, particularly that practice that looks at experiential, contextual, and narrative realities of children's lives. This is not just about medication for ADHD or medication for a child with autism who has challenging behaviors, or a kid with a severe bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, or incapacitating OCD. That's one type of practice. But even a kid with OCD whose symptoms are basically centered around the theme of sexuality has issues related to narrative approaches and perhaps the risk that the child may, in some ways, succumb to some of these very, very compelling thoughts and engage in behaviors that then give rise to protection issues. On the other hand, if you look at pathways of vulnerability, and this is where I want to come back to the point that Dr. Prabhat Sithole made, which is that even in the clinical population, that people who come to you with some of these emotional dysregulation problems or risk behaviors, but if you look at the pathways to vulnerability and how there's increased protection risk, psychosocial issues and mental health problems, and you look at the whole gamut of underlying causes, emotional factors such as parental problems, domestic violence, abuse, punitive parenting, and loss experiences, and how this gives rise to emotional dysregulation manifesting either as anger or anxiety management, attachment issues, post-traumatic symptoms, and interpersonal and relational difficulties. And this relationship is important to recognize because we know now from fMRI studies that children who are exposed to chronic trauma have a severe affectation in those areas of the brain involved with affect regulation. Similarly, early experiences of deprivation and neglect of lack of early stimulation and growth opportunities give rise to learning difficulties and poor acquisition of life skills. Educational issues, on the other hand, such as those arising from learning problems or experiences of bullying or punishment in school, giving rise to school dropout, truancy, and suspension. The reason why this is important is if you look at the JJ Act, changed in 2015, as you know, because of the Nirbhaya episode, or Nirbhaya Kand ki hum jab baat karte hain, you know, this whole media narrative that this 17-year-old was the most cruel, no, it has been amply proved that he was not. अब क्या ये सत्य है कि वो दिल्ली से 80-90 किलोमीटर दूर रहता था? He had one mentally ill, untreated, dysfunctional parent. Is this the truth? That he was going to school, he had a learning issue, an educational issue, and was punished by a teacher, punishment, and dropped out of school. क्या ये सत्य है? एक डिसफंक्शनल पेरेंट और 2 या 3 छोटी बहनों को सपोर्ट करने के लिए ये दिल्ली आता है, and till 4 months before the Nirbhaya episode he was in contact with the family sending money home. क्या ये सत्य है? That 4 months before the Nirbhaya episode, he lost contact with the family, was befriended by this group who was running this transport service. And what happened in those 4 months to his life skills and his decision-making process? And then the Kand took place. Kya ye satya hai? Friends, the Juvenile Justice Act has 2 components: children in need of care and protection and children in conflict with law. My question to you is, where was the Juvenile Justice Act when this child was in need of care and protection? My submission to you is every child in conflict with the law was, is, and continues to be a child in need of care and protection. और इससे ज्यादा दुख की बात यह है, जेजे एक्ट चेंज क्यों हुआ? निर्भया कांड तो हुआ, लेकिन जेजे एक्ट इसलिए चेंज हुआ दोस्तों क्योंकि एक टीचर ने एक छात्र को मारा. If that teacher had not punished this child, he would have never dropped out of school, never come to Delhi. So you see how important it is to extend the framework of child mental health service delivery beyond the clinic to the large population where peer influences of aggression or rule breaking and gangs in children who already have a fragmented sense of self-identity and who are therefore lacking in the life skills to contend with peer pressure and assert themselves. तो ये जीवन कौशल्य उनमें नहीं है, इसीलिए वो मादक पदार्थ का सेवन करते हैं और नशे में जब होते हैं तो और हाई रिस्क बिहेवियर्स होती है, चाहे वो लैंगिकता या कामुकता वाली हो या एडिक्शंस का हो. And you add to that child labor, which includes separation from the family and exploitative conditions, with the experience of neglect and loss of attachment figures, perhaps with a pre-existing neurodevelopmental issue, maybe anxiety, maybe depression, maybe ADHD, with the social skills deficit which come with ADHD. अब ये हिसाब कीजिए, ये गणित कीजिए, put the math together. And why will there not be increased protection risk? Now, this is the psychosocial contextual framework of transdisciplinary practice of child mental health that I present to you, because they have emotional and behavioral consequences, which may then present to the clinic, either as internalizing or externalizing, chahe wo anxiety ho, manifesting as dissociation or perhaps regressive symptoms, or adjustment level disorders, or depression, PTSD, या यहाँ runaway behavior, self-harm, manifestations of anger, aggression, substance use, and ADHD. But the consequences of these emotional and behavior manifestations are life skills issues, sex and sexuality issues, as it happened in the Nirbhaya case, bullying, both in terms of perpetration and victimhood, and developmental disabilities, which have emotional and behavioral impacts, particularly if you're talking about mild, high functioning in mild intellectual disability or high functioning autism and so on. Kyunki inme the risk of abuse, of school dropout and non-inclusion is much higher. और जहां disability होती है, उससे जुड़ी हुई आत्मविश्वास, इनका आत्मसम्मान जो कम होता है, और इनकी शख्सियत जो है, their personhood and identity, and therefore the gravitation towards peer groups who engage in high-risk behaviors. Or developmental disability में, जो neglect, abandonment or abuse भी होता है, this is the kind of situation we are talking about. And therefore, child protection and psychosocial mental health risk and vulnerability of children in adversities, if you put all this together and make a framework of child protection, risks and in adversity and mental health impact, तो देखिए child marriage, child labor, sex trafficking, abuse and exploitation, malnutrition and disease, injury or death, ये संदर्भ जो हैं और ये अनुभव जो हैं, इसका आप core clinical manifestations of internalizing, externalizing, and life skills deficits, particularly those that relate to assertiveness, negotiation, refusal, conflict resolution, problem solving, and thinking in dealing with daily life situations and challenges in trials and tribulations and vicissitudes. तो रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी की जो चुनौतियां हैं उसको ये कैसे झेलते हैं, that becomes a well-being and mental health issue. और इसीलिए इसका महत्व जो है बाल और किशोर मानसिक स्वास्थ्य के क्षेत्र में, खासकर कि जहां हम इंटरवेंशंस की बात करते हैं, एंड अ प्रोटेक्शन इन्फॉर्म्ड अप्रोच टू चाइल्ड मेंटल हेल्थ ट्रीटमेंट, तो जो आधार होगा आपका मनोसामाजिक सहाय के लिए, इसमें इन एनी नैरेटिव अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ द चाइल्ड, understand the context and the experience that the child comes from. Which child are we talking about? Single parent, abandoned, disenfranchised, disability, excluded. लोगों ने इसकी तिलांजलि की है, कटाक्ष बोला है, कठोर शब्द का उपयोग किया है. माता पिता ने ही रिपोर्ट कार्ड को देख के कहा है सारा तू नालायक है, तू बेवकूफ है. Even to look at a report card and tell a child that you're useless, you'll never learn, is like a slap in the face for a child. And if you then put the mental health impact and concerns for the children who come from this context, and within the context the experience of exclusion, of trauma, of abuse, and if you look at the protection risks and vulnerability, this is what is called as a protection informed approach to child mental health treatment. अब इसको आप सूक्ष्म दृष्टि से अगर देखें, इसकी बारीकियां, the nuances, a micro content lens. If you look at levels of response and interventions for child psychosocial and protection issues, at one level of severity, of severe PTSD, where in-depth individual work or referral to tertiary care or therapeutic groups are concerned. At another level, like if you look at the pandemic and the fact that daily routines and developmental experiences have been compromised. So how do you look at psychological first aid, recreational groups, some back to school experiences, life skills training, and at a level where children are trafficked or children live in institutions, or there are disasters like earthquakes or tsunamis and people are in camps, and you're there to look at basic provision of healthcare and physical safety and physical presence and reassurance, to give them the assurance that not only will their basic needs be met, but you are present there in the experience and the philosophy of solidarity. तो ये एक तरह से जो अप्रोच है ये बहुत आवश्यक हो जाता है, और इसको अगर हम नजर में रखें and we combine it with using a child development lens for intervention, the 5 basic domains of child development: physical, language, social, emotional, and cognitive, given the age of the child, then mental health and psychosocial interventions would mean first level response to contain the problem. If it is anxiety, if it is anger, if it is acting out behavior, if it is runaway behavior, through validation, reassurance of the context and experience that a child comes from, and of course, perspective taking with other atheoretical and generic tension reducing and arousal reducing techniques. And of course, participation in group level interventions such as life skills trainings and pharmacotherapy, where it is indicated. But it may also call for specialized interventions for de-addiction or trauma-focused therapies and depth therapeutic work, perhaps on an inpatient basis, with some inputs to the family and caregiver as well, so that there is some level of environmental modification based on protection considerations. What this means is that if a child has been trafficked with complicity of the family for labor or sex work and is in an institution, particularly in the pandemic, if there is a bad social investigation report and you feel that the family is all right, and you try to place the child back to the family, and the child is pleading with you saying मुझे घर वापस मत भेजिए, वो फिर मुझे बेच देंगे, but you insist, and the child is re-trafficked. Now, this revolving door phenomena is very problematic, both from a social and a mental health perspective. And therefore, any decision on placement has to be based on robust protection considerations. So if you use a context and a theme lens, and you really look at the context and experience that a child comes from, and your narrative approach is based on understanding, is the context and experience of trauma or abuse? Is it of chronic illness? Is it a learning or educational issue? Is it a disability issue? Are there acting out conduct and externalizing and challenging behaviors? Are there early childhood and young child issues, as I have alluded to, particularly in the pandemic? And when we use this context and theme lens, then the specific areas of work in children would be children with learning and educational difficulties, or children with disability, or children in conflict with the law, or children with sexual abuse, or children rescued from sex trafficking. Now, children with sexual abuse and children rescued from sex trafficking are very different. Children rescued from sex trafficking have also experienced sexual abuse, but by multiple people, sometimes having to service 4 to 10 clients a day, given tablets to prevent them from menstruating so that there is no loss of income at the brothel for the brothel runner and for the pimp. Now, what these kind of hormones do to a child's health, and then a child is rescued and put in an institution where she is angry and irritable, and you tell her that we've rescued you, isn't it? Aisi chidchidi kyun ho, without understanding what the background of this child is, and particularly loss and grief experiences, or children with neglect and abandonment. So these are the kind of specific areas of work, and this is where the importance of engaging with other stakeholders, childcare institution staff, law enforcement personnel, the education system, healthcare professionals, members of the child protection systems, the child welfare committees and JJ boards. And this is what we have been trying to do to shift mental health professionals' roles from monodisciplinary to transdisciplinary approaches. Unfortunately, hamare training mein, we gravitate almost as a default mode towards a monodisciplinary approach. And what this does is there's a polarization of child mental health interventions with a focus on isolating key drivers of human behavior, which is not helpful to children. So there is an imperative, friends, to working with contextual and systemic factors. So you have to construct knowledge and understanding of children's problems by recognizing the complexities of their life realities. It's not just about treating ADHD. किस तरह के फैमिली से आता है, इसकी विडंबना और इसकी वास्तविकता क्या है? This can only happen if you foster convergent dialogues with multiple stakeholders, both in research and practice, so that you can provide universal and quality access to child and adolescent mental health services for children in circumstances. This, friends, is the essence of child mental health, because only if you do this can you recognize the lived realities of children and their social and interpersonal worlds and their struggles, to develop a dynamic knowledge and skills to identify and address the obvious, yet sometimes imperceptible and complexities that vulnerable children continually grapple with. And this is what we wanted to do in Samvad. So in the first part of my presentation, before I go to the second part, what I want to show you.
एक सांसद ने आज पूछा कि किस प्रकार से आप रिव्यू कर रहे हैं, किस प्रकार से चाइल्ड केयर इंस्टीट्यूशंस चल रहे हैं. मैं सबसे पहले एक बार फिर आभार व्यक्त करती हूं प्रणीत जी का, जिन्होंने 4th कैटेगरी ऑफ क्राइम्स के संदर्भ में अपना समर्थन व्यक्त किया. और कहा that the insurance by this house should also be to mitigate social evils. And how do you mitigate social evils? गीता विश्वनाथ जी उन्होंने अपने उद्बोधन में उल्लेख किया कि there is a need to ensure psychological support and many honorable members have spoken about the need. कानून में ये व्यवस्था, ये अपेक्षा है कि साइकोलॉजिकल सपोर्ट या मेंटल हेल्थ सपोर्ट दी जाएगी अथवा इवैल्यूएशन में मदद की जाएगी, लेकिन कभी भी सुदृढ़ व्यवस्था को लाने में केंद्र और राज्य के बीच समन्वय की दृष्टि से काम नहीं हो पाया। ये गैप एक रहा और इसीलिए आज महोदय अपने आप में मेरे लिए हर्ष का विषय है कि जब ये सदन इस विषय पर चर्चा कर रहा है, देश भर से एनसीपीसीआर नेशनल कमीशन फॉर प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ चाइल्ड राइट्स के साथ साथ स्टेट कमीशंस देश की राजधानी में आज ही इसके ऊपर चर्चा कर रहे हैं। हमने निम्हांस के साथ समन्वय किया, संवाद नाम का एक सेल स्थापित किया निम्हांस में। जब देश कोरोना की महामारी से जूझ रहा था साल 2020 में, विशेषतः हमने निम्हांस से यह आग्रह किया कि आप देश भर में जितनी संस्थाएं और संस्थाओं में काम करने वाले लोग बच्चों से संबंधित हैं, मेंटल हेल्थ साइकोलॉजिकल सपोर्ट की दृष्टि से उन सभी संस्थाओं में ट्रेनिंग की व्यवस्थाएं करवाएं। मुझे आपके माध्यम से सदन को अवगत कराने में इस बात का संतोष है कि लॉकडाउन के बावजूद भी निम्हांस ने इस काम को त्वरित रूप से किया और गत 6 महीने में देश भर में 28 राज्यों में मेंटल हेल्थ की दृष्टि से निम्हांस ने भारत सरकार के साथ सहयोग से काम किया।
So, friends, what we have done is we have taken child mental health to the parliament, because child mental health is a national agenda. The true worth of a nation, as Nelson Mandela said, is judged by the way that it treats its children. तो संवाद क्या है? संवाद एक राष्ट्रीय पहल और एकीकृत संसाधन है बाल सुरक्षण, मानसिक स्वास्थ्य और मनोसामाजिक देखभाल के लिए केंद्रीय सरकार महिला और बाल कल्याण मंत्रालय के तहत in the Department of Child Psychiatry, NIMHANS. Our aim is to enhance child and adolescent psychosocial well-being through the promotion of transdisciplinary and integrated approaches to mental health in all states of the country. तो हमारा एक टीम जो है मल्टीडिसिप्लिनरी टीम है विद एक्सपर्टीज इन ट्रेनिंग। हमारी स्ट्रेटेजिक ऑब्जेक्टिव्स 5 हैं। एक तो स्टैंडर्डाइज्ड चाइल्ड सेंट्रिक मॉड्यूल्स एट प्राइमरी, सेकेंडरी, टर्शियरी लेवल्स फॉर केयर। Second, knowledge and skills in child protection in all cadres of child care services through training, सब लेवल पे। तीसरा, प्रोटेक्शन और साइकोसोशल जो है सरकारी और गैर सरकारी संस्थाओं के द्वारा उनको टेक्निकल सपोर्ट देना प्रोग्राम डिजाइन के लिए। चौथा, स्टडीज, ऑडिट, रिसर्च और एडवोकेसी ऑन इश्यूज पर्टेनिंग टू दिस। और पांचवा, इस कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग को लेके पॉलिसी को इन्फॉर्म करना। वी वर्क फ्रेंड्स इन 4 वर्टिकल्स इन केयर एंड प्रोटेक्शन। सो बच्चे जो किस परिस्थिति, किस वातावरण में रहते हैं, with prevention of and redressal for abuse and exploitation. We work in education, safe and inclusive schools, with teachers are sensitized to identify and provide first level responses. We are working in mental health. हाल में ही we completed a national consultation. 6 All India institutes, CIP Ranchi, Tezpur, and centers of excellence. Prabhat, you'd be happy to know KGMC Lucknow is also represented. तो कश्मीर से, आगरा से, जयपुर, जोधपुर, पुणे से कदम साहब, कैलिकट से, चेन्नई, कर्नाटक, पौंडीचेरी, ओडिशा, तो सब जगह, पश्चिम बंगाल, सब जगह से, हिमाचल से लोग आए। एंड सो वी आर वर्किंग टू टेक दिस आइडिया पैन इंडिया and also to work with policy and law to integrate child mental health into concerns of legal and judicial practices. और transdisciplinary का मतलब ये है कि it is not enough for a psychiatrist to treat PTSD in a child. because वो abuse के वजह से हो and if the child goes to court, there is secondary traumatization that goes on there. So your role extends there. It is not enough for a judge to basically, just adjudicate the case. He or she needs to know कि child development क्या है. 3 साल के बच्चे से हम कैसे बात करते हैं? What does child-friendly courts mean? How do you protect the mental health of a child from secondary traumatization? Now, in this, when the Honorable Minister spoke in the Parliament, we were operational only for 6 months. We are operational now for 15 months. And what all are we doing in child protection? In child protection, Child Welfare Committee के साथ Juvenile Justice Board, Child Care Institution staff, Integrated Child Protection Scheme, Civil Society Organization, including helplines and police officials. तो 75 हमारे videos हैं और before the Q&A session, I will put on chat all our social media handles and our repository of materials जहाँ ये सब मौजूद है. Friends, we don't believe in copyright. We believe in copyleft. Please use these materials, pass them on to all your networks and colleagues. Please translate them, adapt them, use them. All copyleft means is you just need to acknowledge us that. तो ये हमारे जितने भी learning videos हैं, training curriculum, ये सब available हैं that. And what this also means is that even the government now has gone from a scheme to a mission mode. तो जो भी ICDS immunization वगैरह जो था, it has gone into mission Ocean 2.0. Your one-stop centers, women's helpline is Mission Shakti, and your ICPS, Child Protection Scheme, Juvenile Justice System is Mission Vatsalya. तो हम लोग मिशन मोड पे जाके mental health को भी we have taken on a pan-India and international coverage with the development of a pan-India mental health directory with the details of specific services that have been provided. तो हम लोगों ने district mental health staff, tertiary care का हमने अभी शुरू कर दिया है. We are hopeful that जितने भी major centers हैं, जैसे CIP Ranchi has expressed an interest की, तो CIP Ranchi संवाद शुरू होगा. AIMS Gorakhpur has expressed an interest कि वहाँ एक district level पे वो AIMS Gorakhpur का district संवाद का program along with the community medicine they may start. इसी तरीके से UGC का मनोदर्पण और NCERT का मनोदर्पण प्रोग्राम जो मानसिक स्वास्थ्य पे है, and how we will collaborate with Indian Academy of Pediatrics with their iCancel group, the Indian Child Abuse, Neglect and Child Labor group, and also the Indian Child Protection Medical Professionals Network, as well as with the Health Ministry's National Health Mission flagship programs, which is the Rashtriya Bal Swasthya Karyakram and the Rashtriya Kishore Swasthya Karyakram. So isme bhi we are inputting. In education, we have trained teachers, school counselors, NGO staff, Anganwadi workers, principals, and the diet institutions. And in policy and law, judicial officers, mediators, special court judges, paralegal volunteers, with the result that we are now operational in 29 states and 2 union territories, having completed. Now, actually, the slide was made a couple of days ago. We've done more than 400 training programs just in 15 months of operation, training over 1,14,884 professionals. Ye badh gaya hoga ab, with all these training curriculums, and our social media handles have almost 20 lakh views. Iske saath saath, my submission to you and my request to you is, even in little ways possible, some things that you can do is, with telemedicine and telementoring, kaise COVID affected children ke liye we initiated telementoring services with the DMHP, how we did special series which is available in our YouTube. Ye Hindi mein bhi hai, Angrezi mein bhi hai, with a reference guide that you can use. तो ये छोटी-छोटी चीजें that Or we have public discourses. जैसे जब second wave जब शुरू हुआ था, we did a series called August Talks on child protection and mental health. Shanta Sinha was the first chairperson of the National Commission of Protection of Child Rights. She did a second term. She's a Padma Shri recipient and also a recipient of the Magsaysay Award. And the founder of the MV Foundation in Hyderabad has rescued millions of children from child labor and put them back in school. Dr. Jaswant Gazdar is a very revered, respected child psychiatrist in McGill, Canada. Padma Sarangapani from TIS is a very respected figure in education in the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Devanjan is a young and prominent upcoming psychiatrist. उसी तरीके से हमने एक पेरेंटिंग पाठशाला सीरीज करी. ऑल दीज सीरीज जिसमें डिसेबिलिटी को लेके, डिसिप्लिन को लेके, चाइल्ड डेवलपमेंट को लेके, मॉरल डेवलपमेंट को लेके, सेक्सुअलिटी को लेके, एडॉप्शन को लेके, सब्सटेंस अब्यूज को लेके, हम लोग ये तो छोटी छोटी चीजें अपने लेवल में ही, वेदर यू डू इट in the locality that you live in, and this is how you spread the message of child mental health through stories and imagination, kahaniyan aur kalpanaएं, about kindness, about loss, about reconnecting with childhood, about adoption. और ये सारी materials जो हैं आप इसका इस्तेमाल कर सकती हैं उसी तरीके से in and around where you stay. If there are spaces where you can go and give talks and introduce people, you use Diwali and Eid and Christmas to do evocative things like of what to tell your children. बच्चों के बारे में बात कीजिए, बचपन के बारे में बात कीजिए, साहस के बारे में बात कीजिए. And when there are issues of child labor, speak about that. And this is our COVID series about saving children from the brink. How do you work on vulnerabilities? How do you manage their anxieties? How do you break bad news? How do you help them cope with loss and grief? So our thinking and approach, friends, why we do what we do and the way that we do it is we know that in endemic countries, vulnerable children and populations are in high need. There is the MH gap, as you know, adverse childhood experiences ki hum baat kar chuke hain, and COVID has caused a disruption in developmental processes with greater risk. Now, the 2011 Lancet Global Mental Health Series, which highlighted the need to identify and assist high-risk vulnerable children with subclinical symptoms using selective and indicated interventions. ये clinic में नहीं आएंगे. And this is where life skills and universal approaches as well as selected and intervention. तो इसीलिए मैं आपसे कहता हूँ कि बाल मानसिक स्वास्थ्य, child mental health does not lie only in clinics and textbook of psychiatry, but within homes and families, in streets, in residential care institutions, in schools and in courtrooms. The drama plays out there. And this is where transdisciplinarity, which embraces complex systems analysis and integrates child mental health with बच्चों का प्रसंग, उनका संदर्भ जो है, उनकी ज़रूरतें, उनकी चिंता, उनकी आशाएं, and it involves convergent dialogue with multiple stakeholders. And this is where we need to talk to child welfare committees, protection functionaries, judiciary, which we are doing on a regular basis. In fact, on December 18th, I'm addressing the Supreme Court. December 27th, I'm traveling to Bhopal to meet the director of the National Judicial Academy so that I can enable child and adolescent mental health professionals and the judiciary to understand the contextual realities of family, school, institution, and law, whose cultures, functioning, and responses play a pivotal role in determining child mental health. तो ये कहानी जो है संवाद की, to end, what we can do is we have materials for assessment and intervention for direct work. We have material and methods for training childcare workers and IT support. I have 6 studios for video conferencing through which we can assist you. We can do training and capacity building of residents, MPhil, PhD students towards creating a workforce and a critical mass for child mental health, particularly on trauma, abuse, and medical legal interventions. We will collaborate with you for research, and we will help you plan SAMVAD-like projects in other institutions to strengthen public child mental health across the country. So you can follow us on all these handles. I'll put it on chat. But to end, the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, October 2 से November 14 तारीख तक, the valedictory ceremony was held in Vigyan Bhavan with the Chief Justice of India, the judges of the Supreme Court, and High Court judges from all the states. Or I had said we had taken child mental health to the Parliament. Friends, we have taken child mental health now to the Supreme Court. Ye suniye.
It is a democracy that has delivered, as the Honorable Prime Minister said, when a global pandemic enveloped us. While much has been spoken about the 800 million Indians who have received free ration, much has been celebrated about the 1 billion plus vaccine doses. There have been stories which have been left unsaid. One such effort began a year and a half ago under the aegis of NIMHANS, proudly in collaboration with the Ministry of Women and Child Development, where not only children who are in need of counsel in our childcare institutions, but also duty holders who were under immense stress were reached out to. Our endeavor was to ensure that those in need of counseling know that there is someone a phone call away. I proudly proclaim today that in the past 1 year, over 1 lakh such duty holders could access the services of this program in collaboration with NIMHANS, which has been aptly called SAMVAD. And under this umbrella, sir, we hope to now initiate a new intervention. I reflect on the appeal by Justice Uday Umesh Lalit to have courts which recognize how difficult it is a child who undergoes trauma to engage and receive justice. And that is why under NIMHANS we hope to introduce a new workshop and working engagement for those who want to enhance the quality of justice which is to be delivered to our children. From the month of January, 8th January to be precise, till February, we invite the participation of everybody who seeks to legally protect our children, so that they are introduced to the mental health and legal dimensions of forensics. We have endeavored to ensure that our duty holders understand what affects a child's decision on abuse, disclosure, and reporting. We shall also, in this endeavor, ensure that we develop methodologies and skilling sets that elicit abuse narratives from a child without further traumatizing the child. It also embraces in its context childcare functionaries in institutions across India. I am absolutely certain that in this endeavor, we will find a willing partner in NALSA. Yet again, sir, my gratitude for your incessant contribution towards ensuring that we reaffirm to our people that legal aid ehsan nahi adhikar hai. But I'm mindful of the fact that 12 days from now, we as a nation will celebrate our Constitution Day. That we do this outreach campaign in the reflection of 75 years of independence. We must ponder for a while and recognize that these 75 years have been about exploration of our rights. The next 75 years need to be equally about our responsibility towards our communities, towards self, and towards our nation. And I'm hopeful that the forthcoming 75 years strike that balance between rights and responsibilities. That NALSA will be a part of this historic journey is a given. My salutation, compliments, sir, for the journey thus far, and my desire that you grow from strength to strength. For I desire a just future for women and children, and that just future can be enabled by your help. Thank you.
So that's it, friends. Thank you very much. It was always my desire to take child mental health into a national agenda. and to have managed to have taken it to the Parliament and the Supreme Court of this country is something that when I retired on 30th of November, as I told someone, I retire not with relief, regret, or rancor, but with a deep sense of satisfaction of a job reasonably well done. Thank you very much for your attention. I have put on chat the links which you may access. Please do pass it on to your networks. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll find a lot of stuff there. And I hand it over to the chairpersons of this session to take it forward.
Thank you, Shekhar. Am I audible?
Yes,
Is
sir.
everybody able to hear me? All right.
Yes,
well, Shekhar, this is something momentous. This is something very big. If I compare it, what you are saying and what you are doing, if this gets done, this will be something equal to Operation Flood, White Revolution, or something equal to Green Revolution. Two big things which changed food and milk situation and oil situation in India. We were completely dependent upon others, and then we became independent. In what you are saying, if we are able to provide help and succor to children, the way you envisage it here, we will be nurturing and bringing up our generation, Indian generation, right from the beginning, from its roots. And when these children and adolescents will grow up into adults, I think we will, that generation will be virile, healthy, mentally strong. That's what you want, isn't it? So this is great. I'm absolutely moved. And no doubt, absolutely no doubt that you have done your job perfectly well. Praise is not enough. Your work will speak for you. If all of us are motivated to do even a little bit of what Shekhar is saying, I'm sure psychiatry is going to improve a lot in our country. The other thing which I say is that, like say, you see, we have been trained the Western way. We have been trained the Western way. You go to England, you go to USA, you come back to India, and you practice what you have been taught there. Or you remain in India, you read their textbooks, you read their methods, and you try and treat people around you that way. But what Shekhar is saying is absolutely indigenous, it's suited for our country, and it should be done. And the way you have taken it to the Parliament, to the Supreme Court, to the National Law Institute, and such places, that's very great. But the important thing is that if people if an Anganwadi worker gets to understand it, if she's trained, if she's able to do it, if the care staff in a psychiatry children's ward is able to do these things, this will be great. I'm sure.
I want.
Yes, go on. I wouldn't say more.
Yeah. No.
I'd like to listen from you.
But as you were talking, I was reminded of another thing which I actually forgot to add. We had taken a decision that we would take child mental health to the panchayat level, and we are going to launch our work in January with the 112 aspirational districts, 112 of the 700 odd districts in the country, working with elected representatives as well as the CDPOs, the district administration, and the village child protection committees. So हम लोगों ने एक simple booklet तैयार किया है, and we have made 4 videos which we will make available to. So we have already launched our first panchayat training in the state of Assam with the State Institute of Rural Development and Panchayat Raj. So this is also going to be a very major issue of how we have managed to take child mental health to actually the panchayat level, working with the existing systems in addition to whatever else they're doing in a simple way, so that they don't resist by saying we have a lot to do. as it is with so many programs, so don't give us an additional program. So we've done so much of groundwork in actually creating the material, which is why it's the first time in the history of a project in NIMHANS that we have a vertical in policy and law. It's the first time in a project that we have a media manager, and someone doing campaign work to, produce all these materials that. So this is what transdisciplinary, actually means. And to use the traction of technology and the digital medium to actually take mental health wider and wider was a dream that we always had. Prabhat, your affirmation means a lot, and I'm really touched. That what we have done is no less than the Operation Flood or the White or the Green Revolution.
Sure, I have no doubt.
I think we need to develop a tagline that will go with this. Just as the government has the Beti Padhao, Beti Bachao, taglines, and I'm sure we'll come up with a tagline for this. And thank you very much.
I request Dr. Kadam to please give his comments.
Sir, you have made us realize child's mental health is everyone's business. Sir, I work in a government hospital in Maharashtra, where we get referrals from JJBs and court orders for assessment under Section 15. Sir, you have sensitized me and my team more to go in depth and to look into all the factors why the child has committed a crime. And definitely it will be a very good roadmap for us to work on the line of whatever you have done in NIMHANS, sir. And thank you and kudos to your work, sir. I have no words to describe. I was going through your brochure annual report, which was available on NIMHANS website, sir. Sir, it has enlightened me and my team in the hospital and motivated us to do better things for child mental health, sir. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Kadam, since you were speaking about children in conflict with the law, particularly preliminary assessment under Section 15 of the JJ Act for children between 16 and 18 accused of what is legally considered a heinous crime, in the website nimhanschildprotect.in, if you look at resources, we have 2 manuals there on a strategy that we have developed of how this can be done. Our position is very clear. No child should be transferred because they come from situations of vulnerability. We have enough provision in the JJ Act, whatever the nature of the crime may be. But we need a standardized strategy. So this is not a psychometric tool. It is a strategy to retain. And when we give a preliminary assessment, we do not allude to the offense. Because in any case, our critics kept on saying self-incrimination ho jayega. But we told the critics, listen, any extrajudicial confession does not have value in the court of law. So extrajudicial confession does not hold value, but we do not write in the preliminary report anything about the. I would also let you know that we are doing some very interesting work with judicial academies, and the work that we did with Rajasthan Judicial Academy is there in the YouTube channel. So we take Section 15 and we develop 3 propositions, one based on mens rea, another based that the JJB cannot do the preliminary assessment, they must refer to a mental health professional, and that this preliminary assessment is fundamentally against the principles enumerated in the Convention of the principle of innocence, the principle of the child's participation, and so on. And 3 judges speak for the proposition, 3 judges speak against, and there are 3 panelists. One was Justice Madan Lokur, retired Judge, Supreme Court of India, and former chairperson of the Supreme Court Committee on Juvenile Justice. The chairperson of the JJ committee of that High Court, so Rajasthan High Court, and I was there. So we have done this in Rajasthan High Court, Bombay High Court, Kerala High Court, as well as the Meghalaya High Court and Assam High Court. We are now going to do it in Madhya Pradesh High Court. Similarly, we've developed the same thing for POCSO also, 3 propositions, and 3 judges speak for, 3 judges speak. So this is judicial learning and knowledge based on principles of mental health that So the Rajasthan High Court deliberation is there on the YouTube channel with Justice Madan Lokur speaking. So please do have a look at it, and the two manuals which are there in the resources. We have another manual on developmental and mental health implications of evidence gathering under POCSO. So how do you take a statement from a child who's 3 years old? What should be the minimum age of a child? How much can a child say? So the issue is not what to ask, because what to ask everybody knows. The issue is how to ask.
Okay.
And that's what we train judges in. And similarly, mental health professionals also. So this is what we mean by transdisciplinary work.
Thank you, sir. Definitely we'll go through it, sir. Thank you.
Maybe there are comments and questions and from the audience. Maybe?
Yes, sir. There are many congratulations, sir. Sir, first of all, congrats from our side. Our salutes to you, sir. I think somewhere down the line you might be known as the father of child psychiatry in India. That is my my hunch, sir. So, or maybe you are already known by that. Sir, it is stupendous.
I think many people will take objection to that. Perhaps you can call me the uncle of child psychiatry.
Okay. So thank you, sir. Amrit, can we start the questions from the chat box?
Questions, because sir has been speaking non-stop for the last 1 hour. I think we can take a few questions and then. Sir,
Yeah. So few questions was many questions was how to join this SAMVAD project and how they can develop it. Many people have asked again.
Yeah, so I have actually put the email ID on chat. I will also put the SAMVAD ID also, which is info@nimhanschildprotect.in. So you can email us on this and keep in touch with us, and we are always in a position to enable and work anyone. Also, Amrit knows that the lot of questions that have been put will be saved, and Amrit and Alim will send it to me, and I will do a category analysis of these questions, and I'll come back with a second session in which I will just take these questions. I will not make a presentation. I'll take them. I'll categorize these questions based on their what domain they represent, and then address them and engage with people in a dialogue. And we will do it soon. So that's a promise.
That's wonderful, sir. So, sir wants to actually not answer the questions now, analyze it, make it into another presentation, and then come back to us. So that's a wonderful idea. And so we'll take 1 or 2 questions, Alim.
Sure.
Yeah. So one question, very interesting question. When we were small, our parents in society was quite strict, and their parents were even more strict. But now we have changed. We still have got leaders and thinkers. So are we getting too much lollipolly or non-strict? And what is the right way out?
This is a question, Alim, that many people have said. हमने भी मार खाया यार, लेकिन डॉक्टर बन गए ना, तो एक झापड़ मारने में क्या जाता है? See, the issue is one has to take a certain ideological position on parenting, on childhood, and on the whole premise of power dynamics and the exercise of power. Now, let me digress out of this to go into a completely different dimension. You're all mental health professionals, and let me ask you a question, not about child psychiatry, not about SAMVAD, that each one of you, what is your position on death sentence? Are you in philosophy, in ideology, for it, against it, or what they say as rarest of the rare crime?
So we can have a quick poll. Those who favor death sentence, yes. Those who oppose it, no.
No.
Do you please post in the chat box.
So you can see that there is a profusion of no's coming, and you're all people after my heart. It would interest you to know that the National Law University in Delhi has a project called Project 39A, which is looking at the whole death penalty issue and people who are on death row, to really look at what their lives was like. And so these are some. So why I mention this is कि corporal punishment के बारे में आपकी राय क्या है? Should do children need discipline? I mean, yes, no, maybe, perhaps. Everybody needs, some form of discipline. Do children need to be disciplined? Does the disciplining have to be through punishment, and does the punishment have to be corporal? So, ye chaukat hai that. So, parenting and why did you, if you're heterosexual, why did you marry? Why did you choose to have children? These are questions you have to, are children business investments for you? So they will do well and they learn lots of money and they look after you when you're old and infirm. Is that your idea about? So why physical? I've often spoken about this कि बच्चा पिता के पास रिपोर्ट कार्ड लेके जाता है और पिता रिपोर्ट कार्ड को देखते हैं, बच्चे को देखते हैं, रिपोर्ट कार्ड को देखते हैं, बच्चे को देखते हैं, फिर सर हिलाते हैं. Nothing is said. No, can you imagine what it does to a child? Or looks at the report, looks at the child, looks at the report, looks at the child and says, तू कभी नहीं सुधरेगा, या तू कब सुधरेगा, या तू कभी नहीं सुधरेगा, तेरे जैसे बच्चे पैदा क्यों होते हैं, तुम मरता क्यों नहीं, झापड़ नहीं मारा अभी तक. But see the damage that it does. And let me tell you one thing, friends, from a mental health perspective. When I was working deeply on, because of my interest in trauma, particularly in death, dying, suicide, 100 people who attempted suicide, upwards of 90% of them have heard in their childhood a response that invalidated them. Is tarah ka, nalayak. So when push comes to shove, what it triggers off is, in any ways, I had been told that my value was not that. So what does it matter whether I live or die? So this is, if you look at upstream and downstream, हम जब upstream downstream की बात करते हैं, बचपन में जो चीजें होती हैं, if that is not taken, what is the impact? So if you look at people on death row, and if you look at the downstream, what was their childhood like? And if you do an analysis of those stories, you'll be amazed. This is the importance, friends, and the whole premise and philosophy of Thursday Musings as a masterclass in psychotherapy. Stories and the upstream and downstream impact of stories. किसी व्यक्ति को आप 14 साल की उम्र में, 20 साल की उम्र में, 30 साल की उम्र में एक परिस्थिति में देखते हैं, उसकी कहानी क्या थी? What was the narrative flow of that story? And so this child is here. If you don't want this child to be on death row 15 or 20 years, you don't want him to be that 17-year-old in the Nirbhaya case. Why did the teacher hit this child? मारना नहीं था साथियों, इसीलिए तो स्कूल छोड़ा उसने. So this is where working with public mental health becomes so important. That over to you, Alim and Amrit.
Alim,
Sir.
we will analyze and we'll allow sir to come back again. Let us not try to finish. No, let us not try to squeeze him too much.
Okay.
Just can I squeeze a small question? Amrit, if you
always want
allow.
to squeeze something or the other. Always.
Sir, how many man hours does it take to train a person? Suppose an Anganwadi worker or a person who's not formally qualified.
देखिए, किसी की निंदा न करते हुए आप मेंटल हेल्थ का स्पेशलाइजेशन भी कर सकते हैं, लेकिन you may not necessarily have the bandwidth or the empathy to मुझे एक किस्सा याद है. I had an ankle injury once, a ligament, and you know how ligament injuries are worse than fractures. And I had to have an MRI done, and it was one of those second degree, third degree. तो कास्ट लगाना था, वॉकिंग स्टिक थी, मैं ओपीडी जा रहा था लिफ्ट में, फर्स्ट फ्लोर. लिफ्ट खुली तो एक मेरे प्रोफेशनल कोलीग वहां थे, लिफ्ट खुली, वॉकिंग स्टिक देखा, कास्ट देखा, और पूछा नहीं क्या हुआ, सिर्फ सर हिलाया ऐसे, मतलब इसका मतलब. तो मैंने कहा ankle twisted, MRI, orthopedic surgeon, you know, second degree tear, cast. Okay, bye. ये था response. Okay, bye. I went to my consultation chamber, friends. वहां एक 10 साल की लड़की नागपुर से, moderate intellectual disability, severe uncontrolled epilepsy. 10 minutes before I'd entered my room, she'd had a seizure. So you can imagine, you know, she has one look at me and she nudges her mummy and says, "Mummy," in Marathi, I'm translating in Hindi. "Mummy, डॉक्टर को क्या हुआ मम्मी? मम्मी डॉक्टर से पूछो ना, दर्द हो रहा है क्या?" You can guess what my response was. फूट फूट के रोया मैं. Natural born empathy. So the issue, Alim, is not about hours of training. But having said that, please have a look at our modules, because we have worked out, because we don't want to overburden them. Because they'll say, देखिए, ICDS करना है, midday meal करना है, preschool education करना है, immunization करनी है, records maintain करना है, और आप mental. So we embed it within the work that they're doing, nothing extra. And to animate them, to have a sense that they are contributing to an individual child's trajectory. You know, for a teacher, you know, also, you remember that story I often say, that 37-year-old techie who comes back to school and his teacher on the verge of retirement and says, "Teacher, do you remember me?" And the teacher says, no child, I don't, you know, because मासूम लगता था वो, अब उसकी दाढ़ी शाड़ी है. और teacher, but I have never forgotten you. Terrible family background. And one day things were so bad at home. I don't know what you saw on my face. मेरे चेहरे में आपने मेरी क्या शिकन देखी मुझे मालूम नहीं. क्लास के बाद आपने, you lightly called me aside. You didn't do me the indignity of calling me in front of everyone else. And you asked me कि problem क्या. I told you. And it's not that you did anything great, but you said it must have been so much, such a burden to keep all this within you. And future में ऐसी कोई बात हो तो निसंकोच मुझसे बात करना. मुझसे कुछ होगा तो मैं जरूर करूंगी. And teacher, I have never ever forgotten that act of kindness. Can you imagine one little statement on one day, and 23 years later this boy has not forgotten. ये होता है power. So mental health interventions, you know, I'm not talking about complex PTSD and all that. That's a different, you know, with severe dissociation. And I'm not talking about severe conduct disorder or you know, combination of ADHD, mood disorder and vulnerability. वो एक और level का है. So these are the kind of frameworks that we are developing for service providers at all levels, believing that ये सीमावर्ती कार्यकर्ता जो हैं, सेनानी जो है, हमारे फौजी जो फील्ड लेवल पे हैं, चाइल्ड लाइन वर्कर, चाइल्ड केयर इंस्टीट्यूशन स्टाफ, you know, these are the people who are in direct contact with large number of children who will never reach a mental health facility or a psychiatrist, you know, or a service provider in a professional or a tertiary setup. And this is what we are trying to build, but we are strengthening tertiary also, because ऐसी कोई बात हो, red flags कैसे वो पहचाने, तो और फिर भेजेंगे किसके पास, और किसी के पास भेजे वो बोला कि भैया मैं नहीं देख सकता हूँ, ये तो बड़ा कॉम्प्लेक्स है. So you see, we have to work at both levels, and that is what we are trying to do through Samvad.
Super, sir, super. Amrit, should we call Tufan sir? Tufan sir, your comments?
So I am very much here.
Sir, your comments.
What should I comment? This has been highly impressive, Dr. Shekhar, this talk. At times in discussions in child psychiatry, even to Dr. Shekhar, I have many times asked, we are discussing about the children who come to our facilities. We are discussing about the children who are in juvenile centers. But there are millions and millions of children in this country about whom our discussion does not reach them. But to this presentation impresses me that we are reaching out. We are trying to provide each child a root and a wing, which is essential, and they owe it to us. And this is pervasive. Whatever Dr. Seshadri tells, when we reach out to the other stakeholders, it's not that we are going to educate them, train them. We have to just sensitize them. First thing that's done with, and this supports Dr. Seshadri is commendable. I am with you, your cousin always, for any effort in this regard to compliment. Thank you.
Alim, sir, chairpersons, for your concluding remark, then we'll close the session.
Like I said, this has been a great learning session for me. It has completely moved me and I'm overwhelmed. Excellent. And as soon as you organize another lecture of Dr. Seshadri, based on the questions people will ask him on today's presentation, I'll be very happy to join that as audience.
Thank you. It will be a pleasure if you come and join us.
You'll be most welcome, sir. Thank you. Dr. Krishna.
Sir, after your lecture, I think today from tomorrow in my OPD, the assessment style and the work which I do in the OPD, that will be totally different. That will be totally changed. I will be spending more time with children for their assessment, and I'm going through your resource material from the website also, sir. I don't know how much I will learn or whatever, but I will do my best, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amrit, over to you.
सब तो तू बोलता है, मेरे को बोलने देता है क्या? So first of all, let me congratulate Dr. Shekhar, sir. He was not well. He was having serious COVID illness, a lot of complications. But then he agreed. He came, and the way he delivered, there is no match to him. The way he makes the story, narrates the tales, you get into it. There's no escape route for you, even though and everybody is mesmerized with the way sir tells. So thank you again for coming to our show, making it such a great event. Dr. Prabhat Sethole, sir, thank you. You added, the spark to the whole session, and we had two stalwarts today of child psychiatry who were sitting here and guiding us through. Krishna, sir,
thank you.
Very, very close senior to me. We're very close. It is so nice seeing you. Many times we had issues with health, and we always missed him. Thank you for coming and adding to the glamour and the knowledge bank we had. Thank you, Dr. Tufan, sir. Thank you to all our followers. In spite of, the whole world opening up, people going into virtual mode, Zoom, webinars losing their sheen, we had more than 300 people who were absolutely in the show. That's huge for us. Thank you, Alim, for always asking questions, always never allowing me to tell anything. So thank you for that. Thank you to all our viewers. We'll meet again next Thursday. Sir, again, we'll have you within maybe the next 3 to 4 weeks with all the questions and more questions. So,
Amrit, there is a demand for any poem or any song from sir, if he allows.
छोटा गाना है एक गाना दो लाइन
गाना तुम बजा रहे क्या?
ये दौलत भी ले लो, ये शोहरत भी ले लो, भले छीन लो मुझसे मेरी जवानी, मगर मुझको लौटा दो बचपन का सावन, वो कागज की कश्ती, वो बारिश का पानी, दौलत भी ले लो, ये शोहरत भी ले लो, भले छीन लो मुझसे मेरी जवानी, मगर मुझको लौटा दो बचपन का सावन, वो कागज की कश्ती, वो बारिश का पानी, वो कागज की कश्ती, वो बारिश का पानी. Yeah, हो गया.
Lots of praises, and Dr. Ruma, as usual, has sent 2 hearts to you.
Lovely. Excellent.
Thank you
Good
so
night,
much.
everyone.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everyone. Sitole sir, Krishna bhai.
Thank you.
Sir.
Best
Namaste,